What is up, guys? Welcome to the 21st tutorial in our Python language basics. Here we're going to take a look at an example of some simple functions in action. We'll be able to explore implementing and calling upon functions. We're going to cover first how to implement a simple function. We'll then learn how to execute the code within by calling upon it, and we'll talk a little bit about variable scope because we're going to need to know more of that moving forwards anyway. So let's head on over to our notebook now. So this is that same Google Colab notebook from before. The last section we covered here was number 19, where we went over for loops. As per usual, we want to get started in a new cell. Just zoom in there for you guys, and let's go ahead and get started. So first of all, let's explore the syntax of Python functions. It's actually very straightforward. We start with the def keyword to kind of tell the compiler that we're defining a function. Okay, and then we have the name, we have any parameters we need, and then the colon, and then the code goes down here. So again, we're not worrying about curly brackets. Most languages I personally have used have the curly brackets, not so much a thing in Python. We do need to worry about the indentation, however, so make sure that you have all of that down. Okay, so what kind of example are we going to go over? Well, there are plenty of examples in game development, and perhaps a simple move function would be useful. So we're going to do something really simple for now to start off with, and we'll expand upon it in the next sections. What we want to do essentially is take some kind of X position every time we call upon the move position, the move function. We're going to increase the X position by 1, and that's going to be it. Okay, so we'll have a variable called xPosition, okay, and we'll just start out at 0, that's fine. We'll have a function which we'll call something like move. Move like this, okay. We're not going to worry about any parameters or return values for now. Let's just get the basic function concept down. So name, no parameters, but we still need to add the brackets even if we have no parameters there. We got the colon and then the code in here. So all we'll do is we'll say xpos plus equals 1. Okay, so that's a pretty straightforward function. Now, if we want to call upon this function, what we would do is we would call upon it like this. So you call upon a function by specifying the name of the function, and then the regular brackets beside it, and then any parameters that need to be inputted into the function can go in here. So if I had some parameter, I'd have to pass in some value here. I don't, so I can leave it blank. So remember, this will just kind of define the function. This is just the implementation, and all this code is doing is specifying how the function should act when it's called upon. So if we just do this, okay, and don't actually run the function, then nothing will happen. The compiler, in fact, this will give an error, so don't try it. I'll explain why in just a second. But the compiler will basically read this function and it will say, okay, good to go. We're not going to do anything though, because we're not calling upon it. We're not actually running this code. In order to run the code, we have to call upon the function, okay? And that's really the beauty of using functions, is that I can define this function once, and then any place in the program that requires movement, I can just call upon my move function and it will trigger this code here. Okay, so I only need to write it once. It's very easy to maintain because if I need to modify my function, I only need to do it in one place, and then I can call upon it as many times as I want. Now this is actually going to give us an error, okay? If we try to run this, yep, there we go. And the problem is that this variable is actually not known to this function, okay? Even though we've defined it up here, Python does a weird thing when it comes to these variables, in that in order to access variables that exist outside of a function, we have to declare them global. So we would have to say something like global xPosition, and then that should be fine. Okay, so nothing's happening here. Well, nothing that we can see, even though this function is executing. We don't have a print statement or anything. So if we want, we can print xPosition afterwards. Okay, just that we can see the value change. Okay, and we get 1. That's to be expected. We are increasing its value by 1. We're calling upon the function once, and then we're printing it out. Okay, so putting that aside a second, let's just talk about this and what's going on here. So because this variable is actually created outside of the function, but used within the function, it's considered a global variable. So a global variable is available to anywhere in the program. That means any function I choose doesn't have to just be this one. Any function I create has access to this variable. But in Python, I have to add this global keyword, and I have to basically specify that we're using this variable called xPosition from a global scope. Okay, if I did something like this, xPosition equals 0, and then xPosition plus equals 1, okay, and then I run this, well, now the original xPosition actually isn't changing. And that's because this is using what's called a local variable now. So a local variable is declared within the function, or let's say control flow. So for example, if I declared a variable within my while loop, I couldn't access it outside of the while loop. Also note that within this while loop, I can access a global variable no problem. Okay, so this is just something that's kind of function specific. So when we create a variable within a function, it's considered local, which means it doesn't exist outside of the function. It just so happened that I have two variables with the same name. I could have called this something, I could have just called this x if I wanted. Okay, and that's fine. So because this is technically created locally, and I'm increasing it by 1, the original xPosition that exists outside doesn't change. Okay, I could print my xPosition here, and I would definitely guess it equal to 1. But this original xPosition doesn't change. Okay, so in fact what I want is the global version of this, xpos, like so. Okay, and this will gives me access to the global scope of this variable xPosition. So anytime I want to use a variable that isn't locally declared, I have to say global, and that's again only within a function. We don't have to do this in something like control flow. Okay, although again the same rules apply. If I create a variable within my while loop that doesn't exist outside of my while loop, then I cannot access it outside. I can only access it within the while loop. So basically variables are really only accessible within the scope they're declared. Okay? So declare a variable in a function can only be used in the function. If I declare a variable outside but I want to use it in a function, I need the global keyword. Alright. So that's good stuff. We have now implemented a very simple function. We've learned how to execute it, and we can continue to do this as many times as we want. Let's say I want to move 4 times. If I do this, then it should build up. X is basically increasing its value, and because again we're using the global scope of this variable, then we are accessing that and changing its value every single time. All right, so that is actually pretty much all I wanted to cover. Again, this concept of scope can be very tricky if you are not used to programs that have access to like global and local variables. Just remember, if you are creating the variable for the very first time within a function, you can only use it within the function. Okay, so if I created a variable x and set this equal to 5, and then I try to say print the value of x, well, it's not going to know what this is talking about, okay, because x only exists within this function scope. If I want to access a variable outside of the functions, the variable that's declared outside of the function scope, I have to again use the global keyword to get access to it. This is once again only within functions, not necessarily within other control flow structures. Okay, so I would really recommend you play around with this a little bit. Try to think of at least one other example in a game where you might have a function like this. Keep in mind that you can absolutely add control flow into a function. You can add while loops, for loops, if statements, etc. You can even have, actually, no, not so much that, but you can make your functions as complex as you want. In fact, within a function, you can even call upon another function. So let's say I had some function that needed to check my movement, check I'm not colliding with anything. I could call upon that, check collision or something. If I had some function that was called that, I could absolutely call upon it within a function. Okay, so try a more complex example. When we come back, we're going to be talking about parameters and return values. So how to add parameters and use them in a function, and then how to output specific values through return statements. Okay, once you're ready to move on, please do so. Thanks for watching. See you guys in the next one.